something like that. I don't want to know.
Something like that really spoils your outlook on things.
And now let's jump into HDR.
It's all about the tone.
And you can edit this out if you want to.
Hey everyone, welcome to Final Cut Pro Radio, bringing you the best Final Cut Pro professionals from around the globe. My name is Richard Taylor and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. This is Final Cut Pro Radio episode 56. So since the last episode, I've reached over 1 million downloads of the 2 podcasts that I produce. The main one I work with these days is Final Cut Pro Radio. When I started podcasting, I never even thought about 1 million downloads. But here we are. So Apple released Logic Pro 10.4 at NAMM, National Association of Music Manufacturers. There's a lot of new features for those of us who use Logic Pro. I've also found a few bugs already that I hope they fix with 10.4.1. Apple also released the HomePod, their new speaker system designed specifically for music and high-quality audio. I ordered one for music and podcast playback. It should arrive next week. The design looks pretty space age. I'm curious how it will integrate with my Apple TV. So we're still working out the details, but it looks like once again I'll be partnering with LumaForge to bring you live coverage at NAB 2018. LumaForge is going to have 2 locations on the NAB floor this time. The Faster Together stage for probably 3 days or so is where you can hear people lecture about Final Cut Pro and other post-production topics. They're also going to have a Share Station suite where you can see the Share Station and Jellyfish hands-on. I'm looking forward to that. That's the beginning of April. Speaking of LumaForge, congratulations to Sam Messman, Patrick Southern, We Make Movies, and the entire crew at LumaForge for being featured on a high-profile article over there at apple.com. If you listened to the last episode of Final Cut Pro Radio, you heard Mike Horton from LACPUG and Sam Messman from We Make Movies and LumaForge talk about their sold-out event where 3 different groups of filmmakers tested 3 different workflows with Final Cut Pro 10. So you can find us in the podcast section of iTunes. Just do a search for Final Cut Pro Radio, on Twitter at FCP Radio 1. You can join our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Final Cut Pro Radio, all one word. And of course, we're on the web at fcpradio.com. In this episode, we feature Marc Bach, colorist extraordinaire from LA. Marc and I got to meet at the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit last October. And since he is a full-time colorist, I thought I'd invite him back on the show to talk all about the new color features of Final Cut Pro 10.4. We go deep into the weeds, not only about the new 10.4 color tools, but also Pro Tools versus Logic Pro. We talk about U versus Luma, Resolve, tracks, audio, his tangent, Red Camera, Red Cine X, Rec 2020, HDR, and much, much more. Here's Marc.
Hello?
Yeah, there you are.
Finally.
That sounds good.
Awesome. Finally. I mean, it's been ages since last time I used Skype.
Yeah, I use either one, FaceTime Audio or Skype, either one. They work pretty well. Skype's better than it used to be.
Yeah. I mean, I see now.
Yeah. For a while, the quality was really buggy. It was get distorted and everything. But now it seems to be working for the last couple of 6 months or whatever. It seems to be working a lot better.
Yeah, it looks like. So what's going on?
So I met you over there at the Creative Summit.
Yeah.
You weren't even part of the summit. You snuck in there somehow.
No, yeah. I was invited. Like, do you want to come? And I said, yeah, awesome.
What, Tim Cook sent you a message?
Yeah, it was him.
Yeah.
He sent me an email, one of those, you want to come?
Yeah, that's great, though. I was glad to see you, glad to meet you.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first time that we saw each other in person.
Yes, it was. Somehow, you snuck into the audio units on 10.4 and discovered that they had the Logic plugins.
Yeah, I just went, because I use the EQ a lot.
Right.
So I was able to take control of the computer for a second, and I went to the plugins and I double-clicked the EQ just to see if it was the same or they updated it, and I saw it, and that's it.
That's it.
Yeah, so I imagine all the other ones were updated too, because they were not going to upgrade just one and not the other ones.
Yeah, well, at least the ones that Final Cut has. But the compressors are the main thing. I mean, they're really, really nice. They did a great job when they updated in them in Logic, and now they're in Final Cut.
Yeah, the compressor and the And the EQ are the ones that I use all the time.
Yes. Well, the compressor has like 6 compressors now into one.
Yeah.
For the most part, video editors aren't going to be overly concerned about that. They just want to get something that works for them.
Yeah. Actually, the basic tools of the audio improvements, that works really good, actually.
Yeah, yes, it does. I get frustrated with Isotope because they say they work in Final Cut and they don't work in Final Cut. Have you seen that?
They crash all the time.
Yeah, with Final Cut. So that's frustrating because on their support page, it says it's supported. And then I saw an email from somebody just recently that said it doesn't work in Final Cut. They said, well, why don't you change your support page to tell people that?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, it'd be very helpful. I use them in Logic. I
Yeah.
don't have any problems with them. I think it was Chris Hawking that said the problem is that Final Cut doesn't do live audio caching or something like that. That's the issue.
I don't know. No idea. It could be. Wait a second. Somebody was saying something about the Loves plugin.
Yes.
So does it work now? I mean, I haven't tried, but I saw somebody posted something about
It's
it.
a tiny one. It's a little tiny Lufs plugin.
Okay.
And it's in one of the other plugins in Logic. It's like a subset of another plugin. It just happens to have a Lufs meter in the, I think it's multimeter in Final Cut. So I know that's something people have been asking for a while.
Yeah, because that was missing. We could, see the scopes, but we couldn't deliver a show with a proper mix from Final Cut if we couldn't measure that.
Right. What happens is people see red in the timeline, yellow and then to red, but when the VU meter doesn't show red.
Oh, well, I just use it as a reference,
Right.
and then I always use the meters for judging something. But everything that we do anyway goes to, proper mixing.
Right.
It's just a way for them to see, like, hey, that's going to be a problem in there.
Sure.
Let's check it out and then play that section looking at the meters.
Absolutely.
We do external mixing.
Typically it's Pro Tools, I presume.
I guess, yeah.
It seems like everybody uses Pro Tools for their mixer.
That's the majority of people, yeah.
Because Logic's really a music app, even though I use it for non-music things, but it's really a music app.
Yeah, many years ago, people were composing in Logic,
right?
And then they would go and mix in Pro Tools. Yeah. I'm talking about when there was like Pro Tools version 5 or something like that. Some years ago, and it's because the MIDI section in Pro Tools. Actually, when Pro Tools came out, it didn't have MIDI.
I remember that.
So you could not do anything that required MIDI communication. So if you had a synthesizer and you wanted to sequence something, you couldn't do that. You had to record it live if you wanted to do that in Pro Tools. You would have to play it. So people would compose the songs or whatever they were working on Logic, and then they would bounce it to Pro Tools to use the plugins of Pro Tools because Pro Tools had hardware acceleration.
Right.
You could put the cards and have as many plugins and tracks as you wanted. And with the other applications like Digital Performer or in this case, well, Logic had Logic Notes, but you had the limitation of the speed of your computer. So once you hit that ceiling, that's it, over. You cannot add more tracks. Everything starts like bogging down and it would not play. Versus in Pro Tools, you could add PCI cards that would accelerate Pro Tools, so you would have more tracks and more plugins.
Exactly. I remember those days.
So that's what I think that, the whole thing of like, let's mix it in Pro Tools, it started with that, and then it became the de facto standard. And then everywhere you go, they have Pro Tools installed, but not everywhere they have Logic, even though there's a lot of musicians, they only use Logic,
Right. When I ask people why they use Pro Tools for post-production, I don't have a specific set of things that they need for post-production. Why, for example, Logic doesn't do post-production.
They always tell me that it's something about the editing, and I don't know what they mean with that. Like moving rectangles on the screen. What's different about it? But they always say that. I don't know what they mean with that. The same way that avid people talk about the
trim mode. Right.
Yeah, the trim mode, and I understand that. I can see that. Wow, yeah, that's really responsive. But I don't know what it was in Pro Tools that people were so mesmerized with it that they only want to work with that. No idea.
Yeah, I don't either. I know everything about Logic is geared towards music.
Yeah.
But I use it for post all the time, post audio all the time. I find it, a great application for that.
Yeah, I just wish, well, you can do it manually, but I just wish that the zoom in the timeline was the same shortcut as in Final Cut, like when you jump on it, you start, command plus and minus. It's like, what's going on? Nothing happens.
You can map them.
Yeah. You can do that, but it requires, the work to do it.
Yes.
I mean, you would imagine that it would use the same shortcuts or to be in the same world, but it doesn't.
The Logic team and Final Cut Pro team, I doubt that they talk that much.
One team speaks German and the other one speaks English.
And one team's in Germany and one team's in Cupertino.
Yeah.
I do exactly what you're talking about. Since I go between Logic and Final Cut so much, I map my keyboard shortcuts the same. So, for example, in Logic, I use JK and L.
Yeah.
And I do a different zoom in Final Cut. I just use a single key to zoom in and out, and I do the same keys in Logic. So they're exactly the same.
That's kind of like Pro Tools. Pro Tools has I think it was just plus and minus, I think, to zoom in the timeline without command.
Right. I do it all the time, so that's why I made it single keys for me. I just zoom in and out with single keys.
I use the numeric pad, the plus and minus from the numeric pad.
Oh, that's a great way. Absolutely. Are you familiar with the trackpad on the new MacBook Pro?
No, but I guess it's the same as the single trackpad, right?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because I've read reviews that like the MacBook Pros better, and I like the MacBook Pros a lot. And I have the first generation trackpad. I didn't buy the second generation. I wasn't sure if I should buy it or not.
I have the first one and the second one, and there's a huge difference.
Second one's better?
Yeah, and I have a MacBook 12 inches.
Right.
And the trackpad behaves the same way, even though it's smaller.
Okay.
But it has the 3D touch and all that. 3D touch, right? That's the name of the double pressure thing.
Yes.
When you press harder, and then you have like a second button.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's a piece of glass.
I like the mouse sometimes too, though, especially if I'm working for like a long time. I like to switch it up a little bit.
I use a Wacom. I cannot use a mouse at all.
Do you use it with a pen?
Yeah, so much better. Because you're not moving. It's so light. The pen is so light.
Right.
And then the way that the tablet maps to the screen. Do you find yourself when you move the mouse that you reach the end of the table and then you lift it and then you do that thing? With the Wacom never happens, because the Wacom, let's say the right side of the Wacom is the right edge of the screen and the left one is the left edge of the screen.
Oh, I see.
So it's a fixed surface. It's like if you were painting on the screen, but you're doing it on the Wacom.
Gotcha.
So it's real muscle memory. So when you go to the corner, you go into the corner of the screen. So when you click a button on the UI, it's always in the same location in the Wacom.
Right.
So then you start becoming faster, because you know the other thing of the mouse, that if you move it slower, it's going to move just like 1 inch. But if you move it faster, it's going to jump like 4 inches.
Yep.
That doesn't happen with the Wacom. It moves like real time. So at the speed that I'm moving the pen is the speed that it's moving. So it feels more like pen and paper on the screen than the mouse that is relative to what you're doing at any time.
Do you like the Wacom better than the trackpad?
Better than anything else. Yeah. I can go so much faster. I don't get as tired as I do with mouse or trackpad, and I don't have carpal tunnel. You can map the buttons and you can have different functions. So when you tap can be one click, but if you press a button and tap, then it's 2 clicks. So for me, double clicking things is just 1 click. It's just 1 tap, holding a button at the same time. And you can do things so much faster because of that.
How many buttons does it have?
So you have 2 buttons that go where you have the thumb when you're holding a pen.
Right.
And then you have an eraser. So you're hovering over the tablet. That's moving the pen. When you're tapping on the tablet, you're actually clicking. So it would be click and drag if you're touching the surface. It's the fastest thing. It's like the magnetic timeline, okay? It requires a little bit of let me think what I'm doing for a second and, not fight it. No, I just want to extend this one. I don't want to move everything else,
So what did you think when you first saw Final Cut 10.4 over there at Apple? First off, were you surprised that they let us, post pictures and stuff about it?
Well, that was unbelievable.
It was.
It was not like communication is top down. It was more like we were part of the whole thing,
Yep.
So it helps as a community feeling.
So did you know about the color wheels in advance?
No, I just saw it in there, but
So you were surprised?
Yeah. Well, I was expecting that, if the previous release had a lot of audio, this release had to have a lot of video stuff, let's say,
Okay.
So the next big thing, it would have been what they did, color.
What do you think about what they did with color, since you're a colorist?
Well, it's let's go back to basics, okay? You have an audio application, and then you have your audio tracks, and you can record things. But then they give you just one single plugin, and that is a simple compressor, okay?
Right.
Everybody else, they have compressors, they have EQs, they have reverbs, they have delays, but yours only has one single compressor.
Right.
And then they release something, and then they put compressors, different ones, and then EQ and all that thing that I just said, right?
Right.
That's what they did with this one.
Okay.
Now, is it new tools? No. It's not that they invented anything special, but some things are pretty clever. The way that these plugins work in some specific ways, it's something that, they really thought about this, And that's what I like. But the basic function of like what the 3-color wheel, or in this case is 4-color wheel,
Right.
works is it doesn't do anything that it didn't do any other color wheel before. It's just like these little things here and there.
Right.
Same thing with the curves, like the curves are amazing in the way that they work. I mean, they're always amazing as the colorist, or if you want to retouch images. But the way that they added this thing that you can color pick the curve, and then that RGB curve that it's always the same in any application, all of a sudden can change and be like an orange curve or a lime curve or an aqua color. I don't know how they call it, but a different color that is not RGB, And that's the clever part of it.
Right. So Final Cut's the only one that does that, the color picking of the curves?
As far as I know, yes. Resolve doesn't do it. RGB curves are RGB. So when you when you retouch the red curve, it's only the red curve. You cannot change that red to be another color, or to have two blue curves in the same one, but one blue is like more like a magenta blue going to magenta, and the other one goes towards green. You cannot have two blue curves. You would have to do some kind of other operation to get that color selected. And that's why it's so clever, because it's so simple to just change that curve to that specific color and then change whatever you want to change,
Exactly.
Hue versus saturation, all these curves, they work the same everywhere. So for example, if you select a color, let's say blue, right?
Right.
So you're in the hue versus luma curve. So you select hue, in this case blue, and then you change luma, so you would change brightness. So you will make the whole color brighter or darker.
Right.
But if you are in the RGB curves, and then you select the color that you want, in this case is blue, you can make contrast difference. So you can make the dark part of the blue even darker or brighter without affecting the brightest part. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So you can do an S-curve only on the red channel, but because you can change that channel to be any color, you have more power than if you do it with another kind of selection, that it would have to be an HSL selection. HSL stands for hue saturation luma selection. That would be when you pick with the eyedropper, as you would previously do, that you would click and drag on a color on the screen, and it would select just that color. And then you would do in the color board I'm talking about.
Right.
First, you would have to choose the color that way, versus now we can just click with the eyedropper of the curve, change the curve to the color that you want, and then do the curve that you desire,
Does this mean that you'll use Final Cut for coloring more than you would prior because of the wheels and the curves?
Yes. And not just that, for retouching. Sometimes, I do round tripping from Final Cut to Resolve, and then go back to Final Cut, and then I deliver from there.
Right.
Because when you have to do different masters, if you have to do different masters from Resolve, it would take forever. So for me, it's easy to export the color, put it back in Final Cut. Sometimes I restabilize things in Final Cut, and then I retouch some clips. Sometimes, you see it in one place, and then you put it back. You see it 2 days later. I'm going to do the export. Boom. Press play, and you're like, ooh, that shot looks actually different. And you retouch it. With those tools now, it's so much easier to fine-tune versus before with the color board. Going from any value from 1 to 2, the jump would be so big that maybe you wanted to do like a quarter of that, right? That value. Now you can fine-tune way so much better than, yes, I do a lot of retouching in Final Cut.
So does everything translate equally from Final Cut to Resolve as far as values and...
I haven't tried that much because I always don't translate the color. I do it again. Yeah, like a mixer, an audio mixer. They always like to take the mix from scratch and then start over.
Sure.
So in the case of color, it's the same, but I was reading the other day. It was a post by FXGuide.com, I think it is the website, and they were talking about Final Cut being used, in their workflow and all that stuff. And they said that when they were sending to Resolve, it was only a simple CDL, so it would be like brightness, saturation, brightness, saturation, and what am I missing? Hue, saturation, and luma. So that's the only thing that gets translated. It doesn't translate if you have, for example, a power window doing a vignette, or if you have a selection and choosing one color and then changing that one single color. It doesn't do that. It doesn't translate that. I don't know if the XML cannot support that, or maybe it's resolved that they haven't implemented everything that the new XML can bring now. I have no idea, but that's the case. That's what they were saying. FX Guide were saying in the website.
So Resolve, does it take Final Cut Pro 10 XML natively?
Yes.
You don't have to use a translator of any sort?
No, nothing. Actually, it was one of the first applications that would support the new XML and not the Final Cut 7 XML.
I wonder if the Resolve team works with Apple.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I was going to say they seem to be in competition ever since the Resolve had that NLE.
Exactly, and there's a lot of features that
it looks familiar.
Yeah. Yeah, stuff like that, and I don't think that they are like, hey, we're friends in here and all this stuff. So I think that they are working together because they have to work together. Being in the same industry,
right,
and trying to extend the life of Final Cut, especially before. Now
right.
With these tools, I think that less people are gonna be forced to go to Resolve for doing medium level color corrections.
Right.
But because the way that they build these two applications, it was required for them to work, And actually, I like what I like about Resolve. It has become the Swiss Army knife. You can use it anything in, anything out. It just likes everything that you do with it. AAFs, XMLs, all XMLs, new XMLs, EDLs. And then you can import from any application and export the same sequence for another application,
Now, is that in the free version as well?
Yes.
That's excellent. I didn't realize it did EDLs and XMLs and stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome. At the beginning, it was more, for example, I think that before, if you wanted to export an AAF of a sequence, if that sequence was not imported as an AAF on the first time,
right,
you couldn't export an AAF. So you couldn't import an XML and export then an XML, an AAF, sorry. It would have to be import AAF, export AAF. With XMLs, yes, it was like you can import any XML and export any XML flavor. So you can import a Final Cut 7 XML and export a Final Cut 10 XML, or the opposite way around. But with AAF, I think, if I'm not wrong, it was version 9, version 10, Resolve version 10.
Right.
It was required to be that way. Not anymore. You can import an XML now and export an AAF. You can actually import a Final Cut 10 XML and export an audio AAF that actually exports a reference, a QuickTime with it. So the audio guy would have the AAF and the reference.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
When I've opened it up a few times, especially it's version 14, that's what it is now?
Version 14. Yeah, that's the latest one. Maybe it's 14 point something.
So have you done any editing in it?
Yeah.
What do you think about the editor?
I don't like tracks. Pretty simple, Once you go no tracks,
Right.
I don't want to use tracks for anything. Maybe for audio, but not for video.
That's what I use it for. I use Logic for the audio track.
The whole thing of the patching is just so old school. Having to stop your creative workflow for like, wait a second, I'm going to put this in the timeline. Which track am I going to, wait a second, let me turn it on and off. And now let's go back to what I had before. And, in the middle of editing, where in Final Cut, it's just put it on top or put it in the storyline,
right.
And it's that simple. You're not going to step on anything, and destroy something that you have in there unless you want to do that,
No, I agree. I do like audio tracks, though.
Yeah.
Especially when you get to 10 or 12 or 14 or whatever. It's just...
because it makes sense, like if you're mixing a drum set.
Exactly.
You want to have every single piece in a separate track, and then you want to create a subgroup, to mix, to apply a compressor and an EQ for the whole drum set. But if you want one specific cymbal to be higher than the other one, you need to have a track for that.
Yeah, I don't think that Final Cut's done with the audio yet. I think what they did last year in 10.3 with the lanes and the colors and stuff is really, really good, but I think they can continue working with that at some point. So what's interesting is they told us for 6.5 years, colorboard, 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 colorboard. And now they turned around and said, oh, we're going to give you color wheels plus the colorboard. Why do you think the color wheels took 6.5 years?
If you never color anything, the color board is really easy to understand. But if you color something, or you want to advance into coloring in a way that you want to understand like complementary colors and stuff like that, it's not going to happen if you use the color board. Because you add a color or you subtract it. That's the way it is, right? You go to the yellow, and then it says minus if you go down and plus if you go up. But if you take yellow, what color are you adding instead? You don't know. Versus if you do it in a color wheel, you know that if you go yellow, you're subtracting blue. And if you go the opposite way, I'm going away from yellow, but I can see I'm going to blue. And also the main thing that happened with the color board is that it's dependent on where the puck is. The color wheel, it's a circle, and if you go up, it's always going to be red, magenta. If you go down, it's always going to be green, blue, teal,
Right.
So in the color board, you could go up and you could add any color. If you go down, it would add any other color, depending on where you are, horizontally. So you cannot create muscle memory, and this is the most important thing when you're coloring. You had to look away from the image to touch a control and then look back into the image to see what's going on. It's like covering your ears, mixing something, and then let's see how it sounds. You don't do that. You look at the image while you are changing the value, and then you stop when you're happy with the result. And then maybe you look at the value and you go like, oh, I want 2 notches up. That's good. But you're not looking at the value, and then you look at the image. The image is the most important part.
Tangent doesn't work with the color wheels yet.
Not yet.
Right. And the Tangent has 3 color wheels?
It has 4.
It does have 4.
Let me explain this. Depending on the Tangent. The Tangent element, that's the one that I have, it's a part of like 4 panels. So you have 4 pieces that are completely separate with 4 USB cables. And then they have some magnets, so then they get attached to each other on the sides,
Okay.
And then you have one that is all buttons, another one that is the 3 color wheel, another one that is just knobs, and then there's one that is called, it's kind of like a transport control, so you can have the play and stop and all that stuff and more buttons. And that one has an extra color wheel. Now, in Resolve, that only works as a juggle. Is that the word?
Jog shuttle, right.
Yeah, exactly. So it only works like that. It doesn't, you're going to change color with that wheel. But the professional big surface of Resolve, it has 4 wheels, and you can change the same wheels that you have in the Final Cut wheels. So it would be one for the shadows, one for the midtones, and one for the highlights. And then you have one that is the master one. In Resolve, it's called offset.
Okay.
So with the master offset, you can make the whole image brighter or darker overall, which is one control. So you have that 4 wheel, but in Resolve it's not map, because in Resolve they don't allow you to map what button does what. It's built by them, by Blackmagic, and you cannot change that. Even though with Tangent you have an application that you can remap whatever you want, so you can create your own mappings for any application actually.
Okay.
You can actually have mappings for the Finder if you want to. You cannot do it for Resolve. It's locked. They don't allow you to get into that and then remap it. I don't know why.
Well, I'll be darned. So does the Tangent have a default Resolve set?
Yes. That's the one that Blackmagic decided to be, and that's the way it is. You cannot go and grab that 4th wheel and make it be the offset master wheel. You cannot do that.
What if somebody will hack it?
I wish they would allow us to remap it, because there's some other buttons that are, for me, are more important than the ones that are, some of them that are mapped.
Sure.
And you don't want to have them in a sub menu or something like that, or like 3 button pushes away. You want to have them like right away, and you're gonna change that. Now, what happens with Final Cut is that you can map it. The way that it works with other applications is that you can map shortcuts to buttons or knobs or wheels.
Right.
I think in the mapping, you can take one of the pucks and make it go up or down, left or right. But what happens is that if you map that shortcut to a wheel and then you spin the wheel really fast, like 7 times,
Right.
you're going to stop spinning the wheel and then you're going to still see those things happening.
It's like trails.
So you play guitar. Can you imagine like playing guitar, you're not hearing anything, and then you stop playing, and then 1 second later, you can hear what you played?
Yes, that's very difficult.
So you don't know when to stop. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
So that's exactly what happens with Final Cut as of right now. If you want to map anything from the tangent into the application, is that if you want to use the color wheels, you're going to spin it, and you're like, I think I'm okay. And then, I went too far.
Catches up to you.
Go back, and then spin the other way around 3 times. Again, and then one more up, and then you're done. That's kind of how it is. I think that Apple should implement some kind of like MIDI in and out, like Motion actually has it.
It does?
Yes. Yeah. You can map MIDI controllers to functions of the application. I don't know if it's like that, but you can. I think you can apply a behavior, and then you can link that controller to, for example, position.
Okay.
And then you can, if you have a MIDI controller, just turn that knob, and it's going to change the position of that layer in Motion. So if they have that in Motion, why don't you allow us to do that with Final Cut? And that way we can actually build some kind of like interface between the element and any other, let's say actually not just the element, any other hardware controller and the application.
That would make sense.
Yeah, because I have a $1,000 Euphonics mixer that is collecting dust right now.
That's MIDI. What protocol is it?
It was like this Ethernet protocol, something that they had before, and then Avid bought Euphonics, and then they kept going with the same thing. But man, that thing was working. They used the Mackie protocol, so you could use it with Logic. You could use it for Final Cut 7, Digital Performer, and all of a sudden, they stopped supporting Mackie in Final Cut 10.
Now that would be phenomenal if 10 start picking up some audio protocol like that, the Mackie or whatever.
Something that allows you to have hardware controllers.
Yes.
Because what happens is that, yes, the new color tools are amazing. Okay, don't get me wrong. They're super cool. But what do you do if you want to increase brightness and decrease, let's say you want to add contrast by spinning 2 wheels at the same time? How can you do that now? You have to click and drag one and then click and drag the other one.
No, you were the first one to make me realize that when you were on the show last year. As a matter of fact, this episode is going to be 1 year from when you were on last year. But you were the first one, because I'm not a colorist, to make me realize that those wheels, you're doing 2 and 3 things at the same time.
Exactly.
And you're looking at the screen. You're not looking down at your hands. You're not looking at the keyboard. That I understand, because I play guitar the same way. I don't have to look at the guitar when I'm playing.
The way that it's built now is like if you were playing guitar with just one finger.
Right. Right.
So you can play one note at a time. Now, what can you do if you want to play a chord?
Right.
You would have to record first one string and then move the finger to the other string, record it on top of it, and then the other one, and then you have a three notes chord, right? Sure.
Right.
So then you can play it at the same time. That's how it is right now. You can click and drag something, but just one controller at a time.
Yeah, well, I definitely think the controller support's coming. I think, that the new interface just screams for controller, support. So I'm sure that's on its way.
Or just open the door so then all the people can build that, It doesn't have to be them to do it. Just open the door, allow us to communicate in and out in a specific way and tell us, and then, developers can build that.
So what do you think about, since they have color wheels now, Color Finale?
Color Finale, I like it because it does support hardware. So you can spin the 2 wheels at the same time.
Well, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, so if you want to go fast, you want to use one of the plugins. I think that Chromatic supports the color wheels too, like, the element, if you have the ripple or the tangent or the element, So you can use the wheels with those 2 plugins. So if you want to go fast with the wheels,
right,
you have to use third-party plugins. If you want to use the native ones, which they are amazing and they have so much controls, you can only use one controller at a time. So you have to click and drag with the mouse or trackpad, whatever you use.
It makes perfect sense. One wheel is plenty for me.
Yeah, just imagine that, a colorist spends like 20, 30 seconds per shot. So what we do is pretty quick. Like add contrast, look at the shot, retouch the color, white balance, and then I don't know, think about it. That face needs to be higher, so add a power window, track the face, tracker. That's what we need, a tracker. So track the face, and then increase the brightness of the face, and then, oh, wait a second, let's add a vignette, global vignetting here and there. That's 30 seconds. Now do that in Final Cut. If you do that in Final Cut, it's going to take you like a minute and a half. Now multiply
Yeah.
that by 1,000 clips that you have in a timeline.
Sure.
So you work one day in one episode, or you work 3 days in one episode.
No, absolutely. Are you doing color like 80% of the time and editing 20, or are you just doing color 100% of the time?
Actually, I gotta tell you that I'm coloring 100% of the time, and the editing that I have to do is related to the coloring.
Okay.
Like for example, right now what happened is that I'm doing an HDR version of a documentary we already did and it aired, but we're like, repurposing it for HDR.
Sure.
It had a lot of interviews that are like an hour and 30-minute long, recorded at 6K. And then if you have one file of those, it's fine. But when you have like 18 different interviews, that thing slows down the system. I don't know how it does it. I'm not an engineer, but I can tell you that the more long red clips, red from the camera red,
Right.
that you're touching at the same time, accessing, and they have to be like loaded in, I think it's the video memory. So the video card memory, VRAM,
Okay.
it gets to a point where I cannot hold it anymore, and it crashes. And it can happen in Resolve, it can happen in Final Cut. So what I was doing is, in this case, I just used Red Cine X to trim those red clips to be only the 2 seconds of the interview that we're using, that specific, moment.
Gotcha.
And then you don't have to deal with the whole 1 hour and 30-minute long clip. And then it's, it feels like any application using those clips now is happier. So I had to do some re-editing in here, just like to select just those interview clips, export an XML from Resolve, a Final Cut 10 XML from Resolve, put it into Red Cine X, trim the clips, and then put them back into Resolve. And people listening are going to be like, what? You can do that in Resolve? Yeah, go try it. Because sometimes it does it. Sometimes it just like gets stuck with one clip and it never ends. Like I started doing it, and after 40 minutes, I left. And I was like, damn, this is taking forever. I left, and when I came out this morning, it got stuck in like clip number 30. And I had like 60 something clips to trim. And this morning I did it with Red Cine X, and it took 5 minutes.
So like Red Cine X, that's like a media manager?
It's like a red file,
Trimmer.
Main application. No, you can actually do color. You can import a Final Cut 10 XML and do the simple color that now you don't need it because you have the same tools in Final Cut 10. But before, if you wanted curves and other kind of color corrections, you only had the color board in Final Cut.
Right.
So you could actually import an XML of a sequence into Red Cine X and color it in there if you want it.
Okay.
You can actually color something and save the RMD file, that file that tells Final Cut how that red file should look like. So you could have both applications open at the same time and go to Red Cine, retouch a clip, and automatically, boom, it's done in Final Cut 10.
Huh.
Yeah, I think Sam showed that like 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Okay.
Early stages of Final Cut, and using red files. He was showing that you can color something in Red Cine X and see it live, in Final Cut 10 without saving anything, just by having that metadata file that tells the red file how it should look to be saved in a specific way. Once you do that, it's done. Yeah, you can switch from application to application.
That's very interesting. So speaking of Sam, did you have a jellyfish, or do you use a jellyfish?
We set up the whole system previous to Jellyfish.
Okay.
So we have a Fiverr channel, 1 petabyte server in here.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Good Lord, 1 petabyte.
It looks like a lot, but think about it. You shoot one season of something, right?
Yeah.
And then that's 10 episodes of a TV show. That can be in raw material. It can be like easy 40 terabytes of footage. Now, add 10 different shows that you're working on this specific year or just these 6 months. And then if you want to have footage that is there for promos and stuff like that, a petabyte is actually not that much,
Yeah, well, it's not much to you, but it's a lot for me.
Yeah, well, a petabyte of GH5, it's a lot of footage. And keep in mind that now we've been using the Red Weapon, so we've been shooting 8K footage, and the file size of that, it's getting bigger. The weapon can shoot like I think 300 frames per second at 8K.
Wow.
I think. I'm not sure. Okay, I'm not a camera guy. If somebody's listening and I just said something wrong,
That's insane.
sorry. but yeah, something like that. So you can do really cool stuff with those cameras.
Rec 2020 and HDR, do they change the way you do color? I understand the monitor has to support both of those.
Yes. So I'm going to use a lot of analogies in here.
That you go right ahead.
Okay. So first one is color space. That is the Rec 2020, Rec 709, Rec, whatever it is like that. That just color space. So it's the amount of colors that you have available to you,
right,
and the amount of saturation that these colors can have at a certain value, a certain brightness. Let's say.
So color and saturation.
Yes. So for example, Rec 709, it's a box of 20 crayons.
Okay.
And now Rec 2020, I give you a box of 100 crayons.
And that's a perfect way to explain it.
Can you paint red with the 20 crayons? Can you paint blue? Can you paint yellow? Of course.
Sure.
But what's going to be the separation of those colors, right?
Sure.
How many colors you're going to have between orange and yellow? You're going to have 2 steps, or you're going to have 20 steps in the middle. That is Rec 2020.
Gotcha.
And also, it limits how much saturation a color can have at a specific brightness. Now, if you realize your TV, if you put it in vivid mode, things look more saturated than if you put it in not vivid mode.
Right.
But you didn't change the saturation. So brightness affects the way that we see saturation in colors. So the color space talks about that. It's the thing that allows you to have these values under control. So what happened with Rec 709, for example, is that something that it's really close to 100, that would be like the sun in an image.
Okay.
That couldn't be colored. That had to be white. Now with HDR and Rec 2020, you can have a bright part of the image to have a lot of saturation at the same time. And now let's jump into HDR. HDR is how you map brightness in the screen. So it's
dynamic range, right?
Yes. So it's high dynamic range. And don't get confused with the photo high dynamic range. The photo high dynamic range is you take 2 pictures with 2 different exposures, and then you mix them to make 1 picture.
Right.
So what you are doing is the opposite of the video HDR. You're trying to get the brightest part of the image in one picture and then the darkest part of the image in the other picture, mix them so you can see them in the actual SDR screen that you have at home. With HDR is the opposite. You want to show that as it is in real life. So if something is bright, it's going to be brighter than what it was before, like a year ago in your regular TV. With an HDR TV, you're going to see that the sun is actually bright, I mean, when you look at your screen right now, you look at a picture with the sun and you're going to feel that that's white.
Right, blown out, right.
Yeah, but you're going to feel that that's a point of light, right?
Yep.
Now you put it with an HDR screen next to it, and all of a sudden, that image that you were looking a second ago, it's dim. It's like turning down the brightness of your iPhone. That's how it feels.
Yeah.
So one thing that is important about HDR is not about making the whole image brighter. That's what a lot of people are doing. And it's not about that. It's about making the brightest part of the image to unleash the dragon, let's say, to be allowed to make things to be brighter. So for example, let's put it like this way. You have an interview and then you have a window in the background. You expose the guy to be right in the middle. So it would be 50%, right? So the face of the guy is at 50%. But the window, if you would do the scale that you see in real life, it would be out of scale. 100 is not enough. You would have to go to 500, for example, that you see in real life, where a person is in this exposure, and then you see that the window is like 10 times brighter.
Sure.
With the regular scale, you have to compress those highlights and push them down. So when you see the face, it's in the right exposure without making it darker, and then have those highlights under control so then it's broadcast
safe.
It's
in proportion, right.
Exactly. With HDR, it's not about making that face brighter. It's about keeping the face where it should be, at 50%, but then making that window to be at the proper scale like it would be in real life.
Which is over 100.
Yes. So I think that in the scale right now that we're going from 0 to 1,000 nits, puffy cloud it would be 500 nits, and specular highlights like reflections in a car or looking at the sun straight, that would be 1,000 nits. And then white paper sheet it would be between 200, 300 nits maximum. So you can see where before it was just like the high portion of like the latest 10% of the highest 10% of the image.
Right.
That would be the difference between a paper sheet, a cloud, and the sun. Now we have way more range in there to display the difference between one and the other one. So when you see a cloud, you can see the texture of the cloud, and then there's a difference between that cloud and the sun,
Right. Now, how much does the bit depth play in that? I mean, like 8-bit versus 10-bit versus 12-bit?
So that's what you need to separate the colors. So that's in the color space. So if you're 10-bit, then you can have more colors. If you're 8-bit, you're going to have less. That's why you see bending in the skies when you're in 8-bit. That's why you want to avoid shooting 8-bit. You always want to shoot 10-bit,
right?
Because you can see that. Now, Dolby Vision, and I think it's ZR10 Plus, they go up to 12-bit. So you can even have even more.
I got my GH5 and I can shoot 10-bit all the time now. I can definitely tell a difference.
Yeah. And just think about it. Rec 2020 still is only 73% of what your eye can see. So even if when we're going to have, because there's no monitor right now that can display 100% of Rec 2020. It's a standard that they're setting for the future.
Huh.
So it's the same way that when they built the SDR standard of 100 nits, when they established that it was, I think, in the 50s, they didn't have any TV that was capable of displaying 100 nits. They did, well, someday they're going to be screens, that you're going to be able to see this much. But right now, this is our limit.
Yeah.
So they're doing the same thing with HDR. That's why the limit of HDR in HDR10 and Dolby Vision is 10,000 nits.
10,000 on paper, you mean it's that much?
Exactly. It's the standard that they're setting for the future. So right now, screens can go like around 1,000 nits, 1,500. Some monitors are coming out now with 2,000. Dolby had this prototype that I saw it like 2 years ago. There's like a closet, like the size of it. Even though I think it's a 40 or 50-inch display, it's like a closet. It's super deep. That was a prototype that it was able to display 4,000 nits. That's the maximum that we know. So they're setting these standards for the future. Rec 2020, the same thing. Monitors right now that you can buy that are like $30,000 for just one single monitor. Those are like maybe like 90 something, of Rec 2020. That's still under of what your eye can see. So we're heading there, but keep in mind that you still can see more colors that they're being displayed in a screen. Even the best screen in the world right now cannot display all the colors you can see with your eye. I mean, when I saw HDR 2 years ago, it was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. When I saw that Pulsar monitor, that prototype, and they started showing me my color expanded to HDR, because it was like a demo thing where we just brought one episode that we had in here internal, and we took it to the Dolby Labs. And then they showed me HDR with my own footage,
Right.
I was just blown away. It was like real life versus a picture that is like 50 years ago. You look at that picture and it's dim and it doesn't have color. And then you look at real life, out of the window, and then that's what you see in that screen. It was like, I don't know, like cleaning the monitor. So in this case, that's what happened. I saw it, and then they were talking about this is going to be the future. But when I went back home and I look at my TV, and I had a really good TV,
Sure.
I was like, man, this looks nothing like that. And how long do I have to wait until we have that out available for like the public,
Yeah.
Man, it's been 2 years, and now is when, things start rolling out, like, let's say, more mainstream. You have iTunes. iTunes has some HDR stuff. You have some HDR shows on Netflix, on Amazon. Hulu and Vudu, they have HDR, I think so.
Right.
But it's a few things here and there. Now TVs look really good, like the LG OLED TVs are really good and things like that. But a year ago, it was like, oh, you can buy a TV, but you have nothing to watch,
Right.
And 2 years ago when I saw it, I mean, the thought of just like being able to see something that is not in a lab, by a major company that works just in these things, it was unthinkable. So I was I was just blown away, but at the same time, I was really sad because I was not going to experience that thing in like a year.
I know what you mean. Something like that really spoils your outlook on things.
Yeah. Can you imagine if you just go to NAM and you just like listen to these amazing speakers, and then you're not gonna be able to buy those speakers in like 2 years, and everything that you have is like crap compared to that.
Exactly.
So that's exactly how I felt.
Like listening to something on Aratones, if you know what they are.
Exactly.
So when I was talking to Mark Spencer about color, he said there's two things he'd like to see in a future version for Final Cut. Number one is better shot matching in the timeline.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Correct. I agree. You need to compare two shots of the same interview, two different interviews, two different shots, whatever, or maybe 20 different shots.
Exactly.
You want to see all the shots like you can do in Resolve, where you can select like 20 shots, put them all of the same scene, for example. Let's say if it's scripted, and then see that, from the beginning till the end of the scene, you're not going too dark or
right.
brighter than what it was before, Yes.
That means Final Cut gave us the two viewers, but one's for the browser and one's for the timeline.
Yeah. I always said this thing. It would have to be the regular viewer that we have.
Right.
And then the other one is not the browser viewer, is the skimmer viewer. So whatever you have the skimmer, that's what it shows,
There you go. Perfect.
Or a split screen where you can just half of the frame is with the effects, half of the frame is without.
Now, the other thing was that I've heard from multiple people is being able to rename color corrections.
Yeah, that's a simple one, I think.
You would think.
Right? I don't know. Maybe for us it's so simple, but for them it's just like months of recording or something. No idea. But yeah, I mean, allow me that. Allow me to change the name because, yeah, you apply color corrections, and then this is the contrast one, this is the skin tone one, this is the vignette one, this is whatever, and then you can see which one is which one. So if you pass that project to another person, it's going to know, or maybe you're going to reopen that project in 3 months and you don't remember which one was doing what,
Exactly.
To the wish list, I would add, yes, correct, shot comparison tool. Yes, rename color corrections, native tracker. It's really important, a native tracker. You need to have a tracker where you can track a shape, like if you make a power window to increase the brightness of a face or something like that, you want to track that. The guy is moving, gonna, move her face while it's moving, or talking, or is like walking or something like that. You want to track that. You don't want to rely on a third party because you want to have integration. You want to have shortcuts for that. And it goes to the next, requirement for me, that it would be to have hardware control. So I don't need to look at the UI. I don't need to click anything on the screen. I can do that with buttons. So I can feel the buttons while I'm looking at the screen.
Yeah, so we don't have any tracking natively in Final Cut. There's some in motion. There's a limited tracking in motion.
Yeah, but it's a point tracker, so it's gonna track a pixel or a little group of pixels. I don't know how it works exactly, but in Resolve you have
planar tracker.
No, you don't have planar tracker. You have the 3D tracker that is some kind of planar tracker, but it doesn't work in planes.
Okay.
Like a planar tracker is a tracker that tracks a shape on a plane. Let's say you have a wall, it's going to track that plane of the wall. You can track two walls if you want to, but it's going to track that shape. And if the camera changes its parallax, or its axis through, from the wall, the tracker is going to track that. So it can track scale, rotation, and these changes in using the planes. Now, when you go to a point tracker, it can only track position. It cannot track scale. You need 2 points to track scale. The way that the 2 points are going to be closer or farther away throughout in time, they can interpolate that and say like, okay, this is getting smaller or bigger, bigger or smaller. But you cannot do that if you only have 1 point.
Well, that makes sense.
So you need at least to have that's what After Effects has. You can have a one single point tracker. You can have a dual, so you can track scale. And then Resolve works even better because it has a cloud tracker. So you define an area you want to track, and it's going to automatically add, like, let's say, 100 points, and it's going to track them.
Wow.
And then it's going to average all of them. So if there's few of them that they go off limit, out of the shape that you wanted to track, it's going to discard those, but it's going to use the majority of, let's say, like 70% of the points are moving left, we're going to move the shape left,
Right.
And the same thing with the size and all that stuff. It's going to change the size using those points. But it's automatic. You don't need to select like 100 points one at a time. You just do a circle.
Right.
And and track is going to select those automatically, judging by, I think, by contrast and sharpness. You can actually select a portion and say, like, don't track this, don't make points in this area of the image, or make them only in this area of the image, but it's automatic.
That's pretty sophisticated. I didn't realize that Resolve did that.
And it's so fast. It's like it takes like nothing to track a 4K shot, you know?
So is an iMac going to benefit Resolve? I mean, iMac Pro, I meant. iMac Pro.
Yeah, the iMac Pro is going to, because the GPU is so much faster. There's already tests on barefeeds.com, and you can see that, it's so much faster in Resolve than the Mac Pro with 2 GPUs.
Did they test it with Resolve?
Yeah, there was a denoise test. I think it was like 60-70% faster than the Mac Pro with 2 GPUs.
What do you think the Mac Pro is going to be? They said it's going to be modular, and they said it's going to be upgradable.
So I don't know. I mean, no, they can just surprise us in the way that they can just give us an iMac with the with the components that we have in the iMac, but it's modular, so you can actually take the GPU and put another GPU.
Yes.
And it doesn't have a screen. Or they can just go back in time and give us a tower with different PCI slots, or maybe just one to put 2 GPUs, or to put whatever we want in there. I mean, keep in mind that 80% of the needs of having a PCI slot, it's gone with Thunderbolt.
Right, but somebody said today that 16 times faster than Thunderbolt 3.
Exactly. So you have the PCI lanes, right? So you have 16 PCI lanes in a graphics card, for example.
Okay.
In Thunderbolt, you don't have that.
Right. How many do you have in Thunderbolt?
4 or 8, I don't remember. Putting GPUs aside, the speed of Thunderbolt is enough if you wanted to do something like a Fiber channel, or like USB cards, or video in and out of Final Cut.
Right.
All that stuff with Thunderbolt, even Thunderbolt 1 is more than enough to get rid of all these expansion PCI slots that you needed before to put all these devices, right? It was impossible to do it with like USB 2. It would not be fast enough. You would have to have those PCI cards in the computer. Now, with Thunderbolt 3, and the need for those is gone. So the only PCI slots that you need is for really fast in and out. That would be a GPU.
Okay.
You don't need a PCI slot anymore. 10 gigabit Ethernet. You can have a Thunderbolt 3 connector, or you can even have it native in the iMac Pro.
Okay.
So you don't need a PCI slot just to put a 10 gigabit card,
I'd like to see a smaller version of the cheese grater. That's what I'd really like to see. I don't want internal hard drives. I don't need that, just an SSD. Because they're plenty fast on Thunderbolt 3.
Exactly. That's another thing that we don't need anymore. Before, you needed that internally or you would go with like SAS connections and stuff like that, or you didn't have that speed if you wanted. So now you don't need that. I mean, if you ask me, I'm going to ask as many PCI slots as I can, so then I can put as many GPUs as I can, because I work in Resolve.
Sure.
But I would say that 4 PCI slots available, not taken by something else. Like if you give me 4 PCI slots that are available to me so I can put like 4 GPUs, I would be more than happy without any internal storage. Now, dual CPUs, I don't know. It could be, Resolve can take anything. Like if you have 20 GPUs and you would have like, I don't know, 30 CPUs, it would take everything you have in there. And
is that right?
Yeah, it can take anything. It sucks it all in. It's like, it's mine.
And it uses it.
It's really good at. And some 3D applications, yes. But my understanding is that, they backtrack from the dual CPUs because not a lot of applications were taking advantage of that.
Right. That's what I understand.
Because in our world, we think like everybody that is a pro does video, but no, there's a lot of like mathematicians.
Of course, scientists, sure.
Then maybe their application was not using all the cores of the CPU. So having 2 CPUs with like 20 cores, it was not good for them. It was better to have 1 core and then the fastest thing in the world, right?
Right.
I don't know if that's exactly the case, but I'm just saying that different people have different needs. And when Apple looked at the dual GPU setup with 1 CPU, they look at some specific things and they discarded the other people that they needed PCI slots, and maybe they didn't need 2 GPUs but needed 1 really powerful GPU, and maybe they needed 2 CPUs instead of dual GPUs. And I think that this new Mac Pro is going to be able to be configured to whatever you need because they made that mistake before.
Yes.
So if they want to correct that, I would think that they would allow single and dual CPUs and multiple PCI slots for different things, but mainly it would be for GPUs.
So in the Mac Pro, the 2013 Mac Pro, does that have PCIe slots for the graphics cards?
The cylinder?
Yeah.
No.
What kind of slots does it have for the graphics cards?
That was the main thing. Why everything that they said about we're gonna make a 2000 update the computer, because that's BS. That's total BS, because they could. Because they said, no, because we made the computer so small and it was so effective, but now with the GPUs, they run hotter. No, they actually run cooler than those GPUs. The problem with it is that I am AMD and I'm talking with Apple and I'm making this GPU that is the fastest thing today.
Right.
And I release it. I need to give it to Apple so then they can modify it and make it in the proprietary thing that they made the cylinder. Because the connection that you have inside of the cylinder is not the same connection that you have in the CPU. So you have to modify the video card, the graphics card, in a different way so then I can put it inside of the cylinder. Now, by the time that I did that, there's already a new one out. It's always going to be a year later. Yeah, but the main thing here was the GPUs, because the CPU, it goes in a socket, so you can actually put another one.
Okay.
But the GPUs, there's nothing like that, and there's no third party. It was a proprietary thing, so NVIDIA cannot make a GPU with the connection to go inside of the Mac Pro 2013.
I'm just going by what the old Mac Pro was. There were PCIe slots that you put the graphics cards in. So the Mac Pro 2013 didn't have those slots?
No, it was different. They changed that connection to be smaller, and then they made it proprietary.
Okay.
Nobody can make that.
Gotcha.
The cylinder Mac Pro is perfect for audio. It doesn't make any noise. It has all the Thunderbolt in and out. They can connect all the audio, hardware that they have via Thunderbolt or with Thunderbolt adapters, if they're like Firewire or something like that. And it's powerful enough for everything that they have to do. Is that triangle, the thermal core that they call, that is 2 GPUs on 2 sides of the triangle, and then the CPU goes on the other one.
The third side, right.
So what happens is that, and I can tell you that because I've seen it, I have iStat menus to track the temperature, is that if one GPU is being used more than the other ones, then at that side of the triangle, it gets hotter. It cannot tackle the temperature the same way as if the load, like Final Cut does, goes distributed between the 2 GPUs and the CPU. So what happens when one side of the triangle, only one side gets hot and not the other ones?
Yeah.
There's a point where you're going to do that. So if the applications are not taking advantage of the resources equally, you get a computer that gets too hot on one side and then boom, things happen.
And that's not good, exactly.
That was the problem with that computer. If developers would develop their applications to use the resources the same way as Final Cut does, Final Cut 10, it would be fine. But even Resolve would use one GPU more than the other one. And I can see one is like 10 Celsius degrees hotter than the other one, And that GPU that is hotter is actually 15 to 20 Celsius degrees hotter than the CPU. If you don't have that, then that thermal core that they put themselves into a corner is not going to work. And that's why I think that the new Mac Pro, it's not going to have these problems. If it was me, I would just walk away from that. I mean, it's an amazing computer. I really like it. It's small, it's silent, and it's powerful for what it is.
So when you're typically doing, if there is a typical way that you color correct, you have a primary correction, and then you have, how many secondaries do you typically do?
Oh, it depends on the shot.
Just completely depends.
You can have like maybe 1, maybe nothing, or maybe you can have 20. Yeah, it depends on the quality of the shot, how it was shot, what you're trying to do with the shot. It's a lot of things. So for example, what happens is we have this music show and it's set up to have these interviews with the artist, right?
Yep.
And then the light is set up for that, one artist coming, let's say a singer, and sit down and talk to the host. But sometimes the whole band is sitting in there. And then you have one person, it's properly exposed, but then you have 3 other people sitting in there, and one is too dark and the other one is too bright. So you start making power windows, so 1 power window per person, to balance that and to have them equally, right?
Yep.
So that could be easy for secondaries. And then maybe you have another one for the skin tones. That's another one. And then maybe you have a global vignette. And maybe you have a specific problem with floor that it was reflecting too much. So then you add another one, and then you go with 7. So, and you can keep going.
Yeah. Do you do any shooting yourself?
No, I don't shoot anymore. I'm a very real person, and I always say what I think. And if I have enough confidence, I'm gonna say it to you, right?
Yep.
So there's a producer in here, director, that he was shooting stuff, and I would tell him like, "Look, this shot is a piece of crap because you didn't have the camera in the right place." I don't know how me, Marc Bach, doesn't know how where to put the camera, and I don't know where to put the light. But I can tell you that that shot is too dark or it's too bright, or it should have a light in here,
Sure.
hitting this side or the other side, right? So I started like showing things like that to this specific director. 3 documentaries later, he's so good now. He has evolved because he was able to see where he was making his mistakes before. A lot of people shoot and they never see their footage.
Yes, absolutely.
A commercial DP is going to shoot, go home and see the footage like 3 weeks later and doesn't remember what he did exactly.
Sure.
And some of the people, they don't even see their footage. It's just like, shoot it, give the interview to an editor and the director, and they never go back. So you don't know if you made your mistakes, any mistakes in the footage. In this case, sitting with me in the color bay, I can point at things and I can show the comparison with another shot and say like, look, this one has the right exposure and has the right rim light in the back of the head. And then you see that it looks so much nicer, right? Like you
Right.
like this one? And it's like, oh, yeah. And the mental note, put a backlight and things like that can help a lot. But myself, I don't do it anymore. I did in the past. I shot some music videos, in Spain and stuff like that, but I don't do that anymore. You give me a camera, I know how to use it, but
Sure.
you start giving me lights, and after 2 lights, I don't know what to do with the rest of them.
You mentioned iStats menu. You like that?
Oh man, it's a must-have.
Yeah, I think I'm going to buy it. The new one just came out, version 6.
Yeah, so I use it for all my computers. I have the family pack, and sometimes you go like, what's going on? Computer's not responding. The application is not responding. You go to iStat, and you can see, oh yeah, something's going on in the background, and then you see that it's the App Store doing some kind of process, and it's bogging down the computer. It's not Final Cut, or it's not like the application they're using in the foreground. It can be something in the background, and you see it right away. I can see those bars, of the CPU moving.
And you can tell it's the App Store?
Yeah, because if you click in the drop-down menu,
Yeah.
it shows you the graphs, and it gives you the top processes using resources. And then you can see the GPUs, or for example, when you try to load a website,
Yeah.
and then you're like, what's going on? This is not loading. You can have the in and out of the internet connection, right? So if you're using airport or Ethernet, in my case, I use this to monitor the connection with the 10 gigabit server that we have. We have 2 servers. We have one that is a 10 gigabit server and another one that is the fiber. So I monitor the Ethernet connection of that. If Resolve is not responding, it could be because the hard drive is not giving the file to Resolve. So
Gotcha.
I use that all the time. Yeah, I use it also to monitor the temperature of the GPUs and CPUs, because the 2013 Mac Pro would glitch in Resolve. It would get over like 83, 84 Celsius degrees in one GPU. And then you can add rules for this fan. Let's say if the computer goes over 60, I want the fan to go 1200 RPM. You can do this thing. Yeah, you can do a lot of stuff.
Just sold me. I'm going to buy the family pack myself. All right. Anything else about 10.4? What about 360?
360.
Yeah.
Look, 360 is the thing that we're thinking, why the hell did they put that? Who wants 360? It's one of those things that you don't realize how good it is until you're going to be like, oh man, everybody's doing 360. Because it's not about doing VR. I think it's more about 360 video, where you're going to have, you use with the mobile devices, the easy of use of the GoPro Fusion and all these cameras that are coming around, where you just record and then you can choose the point of view after the fact. And not just that, it's like you can have all this like immersive video, if you have an action video and stuff like that. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's one of those things that we don't realize the potential of it until we just like get it in the face, like.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's so intuitive and easy to use in Final Cut 10 that.
Yeah, that's what I like. Yeah, the way they've implemented it.
I'm even starting to think about it, like when we shoot these videos of these shows of the concerts, like to put a couple of 360 videos and then do a social media feed where you can actually turn around if you want to in the middle of the stage where
Yep.
the singer is, or you can see the audience. You can turn around and see the audience, or you can go the opposite way around and see the stage, or things like that. Or you can have it in the middle of the guitar and then you see the fingers on one side or the hand on the other side, or actually the face of the guy playing the guitar.
I agree. Now the problem is you're gonna have to color correct that.
Oh yeah.
It's more work than just the one frame.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. More color to do is good for me. That's future.
There you go. There you go.
What do you think, personally? What do you think about the update?
Well, I like both the color wheels. And, well, listen, I love the white color picker. We didn't even talk about that.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about the white color picker is I plotted and I fool around with it. And once you apply that color effect, it's automatic. And then when you pick the white that you want with the color picker, it's not the same as the automatic. So what is the automatic doing? You know what I mean? They're not the same. I would think they'd be somewhere close. But the main thing is that I don't like about it is where can I adjust that white balance?
Okay. I think that the automatic, what it did in the past, it would look at the darkest and the brightest part of the image, thinking this has to be black and this has to be white, but you can control that.
Okay.
And it would just try to adjust it. And the color picker, you are telling the application, I know this is neutral, so it has to be gray or black or white.
Okay.
It doesn't have any color. And then based on that decision, if it's off white, it's gonna apply the opposite values to offset that change and leave it neutral after.
Right. What I would like, though, in either case, I'd like to go back in and be able to tweak those, the automatic or my manual setting.
Doesn't I haven't tried because I always do it manually. I never use the white balance. I always do it using the scopes.
Okay.
So I find the part of the image that I want to use as my reference, and then I use the scopes to have the same values in the red, green, and blue channels.
Sure.
So I haven't tried the color picker for the white balance, but
I have, and all you can do is that I've seen you turn it on and off.
Oh, okay. So it's on and off. You can re-click it, right? You can click on another part of the image, but you cannot say no, you were wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Just tweak a little bit. I'm going to see what the heck it's doing, and you don't get that option.
Yeah, where you can have the RGB values and go no, you added too much red. Let's take it down a little bit.
Yes, that's what I mean, yeah. At least so far, I haven't seen...
And I know how you can get that. It's you go to the menu, Final Cut menu, and it says feedback. And then you send it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Because I've always complained about, before they had this one, I always complained about the automatic the same way. You could not adjust it. You accepted it or, you turned it off, but there's no way to tweak it.
The main thing here is that if you want to tweak it, then you use the color wheels to balance, You're going to do it yourself. If you want to do it automatically, it's because you don't know how to do it. And then you're just going to click in here. I guess Final Cut did the good thing. I don't know what I'm doing. Let it be,
Yes.
If you want to jump in and start tweaking things, then it looks like you know something more than the application, so then you should do it manually.
I understand, but it's just that since it's doing something, I just want to see what it's doing.
Let me see under the hood.
Let me just turn a little turn down arrow. Let me see what it's doing, and I might just tweak it a little bit one way or the other. That's all.
Yeah, but then you have the wheels.
It just adds your own color correction, but still. Sometimes there's just too much automatic and behind the scenes. I like, to get in there and mess around a little bit. But anyway.
And what do you think about 360 video?
I like Final Cut Pro's version of it.
Right?
I was amazed at how well it's integrated into the graphic interface. It's just there. It's not a plugin.
Yeah, it's so easy to do that I don't need it for anything, but I just want to do it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Steve Martin says a 4K camera is pretty soft, so you want to get an 8K. So hopefully the 8Ks will be down in price at some point.
So that, you have the $200 360 camera that's under 4K or maximum at 4K. And then you have the ones that are like 500, 600, 700. Those are the ones that are like 5.7K. And that's the one that you want to buy.
That's interesting. I wonder why they got 5.7.
Is something about the size of the sensor or something like that? Because there's...
that's what I figured, yeah.
The Panasonic camera, there's one of the... Panasonic new cameras is called EVA or EV something.
Right.
And that's actually 5.7K too. Something like that I don't want to know.
Yeah, the heck with it. Exactly. Okay, Mark, that's great.
That's cool. That you're gonna chop it, or you're just
Oh,
gonna?
yeah, I edit it down.
Okay.
Right now, we're at 1 hour, 42 minutes. I'll get it down to an hour.
Wow. We talk a lot.
Well, that's okay, but that's one of the reasons I do it in Logic. It has a nice 1 hour, 2 hour timeline, and it scrolls for me so I can look at the waveform while I'm chopping it up. It's nice.
Yeah.
I do 2 mono tracks. I record your track in mono and my track in mono, so I have 2 separate mono tracks.
Okay. So then you can, if I'm talking at the same time as you can cut it out.
Well, what I can do is, I swipe over a little area that we're talking over each other. I click it. It makes an in and out point on that clip, and I can slide it left or I can slide it right.
Ah, okay.
So we're not talking over top each other.
Yeah.
Because it happens all the time, of course.
Yeah.
Talking through a Neumann TLM 103.
Wow. That's good stuff.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And it's also, I got it going through a Presonus preamp with a compressor and EQ. I don't use a compressor. I do that in post with the Waves plugin, but I do use the EQ.
Yeah.
It's a nice parametric, hard-dialed EQ, and it has a preamp and stuff. So,
Question, what guitar amp do you have? You said you had a...
Mesa Boogie Mark III.
Oh, the Mark III. Okay, yeah. It's a combo or is a...
Yeah, it's a 12-inch combo. I like the 12-inch combo. And I have an extension speaker, another 12-inch cabinet that I used to use sometimes, but it changes the sound. I like the one sound. It also has a graphic EQ that I can switch in and out.
Yeah. Had like the 5-band EQ, right?
Yes, exactly. It's all about the tone.
That's exactly like color correction.
Yeah, I know. We always make that analogy. And as soon as you talk about guitars, I said, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
If you have the DP shot with the right exposure and everything was properly balanced,
right,
that is like having the right tone. Then you play, and you play so much better than before.
All right. I think we said enough.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much for having me here.
Absolutely, Mark. It's my pleasure.
See you the next time.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So there you have it, episode 56 of Final Cut Pro Radio with Marc Bach. You can join our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Final Cut Pro Radio, all one word. On Twitter, @FCP Radio 1, number 1. On the web, fcpradio.com, and of course you can find us in the podcast section of iTunes. So until the next show, this is Richard Taylor, signing off.